Welcome to our series on the basic concepts of Heilkunst medicine. And today's topic is the question, what is a homeopathic remedy anyways? I'll remind you, as I do in all the videos, that you're welcome to add your question. If you're watching live, just type your comment into the box below. Or otherwise, if you're watching this as a replay, same thing, and I will find your comment and incorporate it into a future video. So let me just set up my screen here. Let me go to the right frame. Okay, so what is a homeopathic remedy? This is our question today. And I'll give you a little hint. We're going to find out that most of us, or at least some of us most of the time, or most of us some of the time, including myself, use that word incorrectly, or kind of in an inaccurate or a loose manner. So loose lips sink ships, as I say here. Most of the time, the term homeopathic remedy is used inaccurately in everyday speech, and that includes myself. We'll often use it to refer to the medicine or contents of a dosage bottle, as in, could you pass me that homeopathic remedy bottle, please? Or, oh, look, this health food store sells homeopathic remedies. I've said either of those things countless times. And as I say, in everyday language, there's nothing wrong with that. We get the message across and we know what we're communicating to the other person. But in a more specific scientific context, when we really want to understand the philosophical context of Heilkunst, we're going to need to unpack this a little further and get more clear and more accurate about how we use words in certain contexts and what they actually mean. So let's start with the definition of the word remedy. And this, a very basic definition I have here, is to restore something to its original state of wholeness. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. And as I indicated at the top of this slide, as in the style of a dictionary, the letter V in parentheses after remedy indicates we're using it as a verb here. There is also a noun usage for the word remedy. Like I was saying earlier, pass me that that remedy bottle. That's more of a noun usage, but we want to really focus on the verb usage, which gets to the purpose and how we want to be using the word remedy. So as I say, to restore something to its original state of wholeness. In the legal system, the word remedy is used, and there it means to rectify a wrong that has been done. So in this photograph I have here, imagine that's your car and your neighbor's tree has fallen over and smushed your car. Well, in the legal sense, you could say that they could be ordered, they would be legally responsible to remedy that situation and to pay for, restoring the car to its original state, so that there's no more apparent damage in that car. Or if it's beyond repair, then it would be a matter of replacing the car with, very similar model and value of the car that was damaged. In health in general, and in Heilkunst in particular, if you remember from our previous video when we talked about the 3 jurisdictions, we can talk about remedies at really any of the 3 jurisdictions. So in the regimen jurisdiction, we talk about a remedy which is able to restore balance. In the disease jurisdiction, we talk about a remedy being able to effect a cure. Or in the therapeutic education jurisdiction, the 3rd jurisdiction, we talk about a remedy which can dispel ignorance or delusion and establish the truth. So we have, I'm just spelling this out as an example of what we've talked about in a previous video, but along these 3 jurisdictions, the idea here is that the remedy, the word remedy, can have a fairly broad meaning. It can apply in all these different contexts, and it will appear or be implemented in different ways. Now, as I said a moment ago, we want to be very precise in our language, and so my note at the bottom here says, if your procedure or medicine does not remedy a given situation, then you cannot call it a remedy. It's only a remedy if it actually remedies something. Now, to further define our next word, homeopathic, and to be very specific, we are using this as an adjective, and that's important for a reason you'll see in a second. The word homeopathic as I'm saying here, as an adjective, what it's really describing is the relationship between a medicine and a disease, which are highly similar to each other. So back, as I was saying a couple of minutes ago, you can't just say, pass me that homeopathic remedy and necessarily be accurate. The question is, who is that remedy for? Which disease are you treating in that person? And is that supposed remedy homeopathic or similar to the disease that's being treated? So only then, in a very specific technical sense, can you correctly call that homeopathic? Otherwise, just because you go into a store and you buy a bottle and it says homeopathic remedy on the label, it's not homeopathic until it has that homeopathic relationship to a specific disease that's being treated. So, as I say, that's where you want to get really exact with the word homeopathic, and remember and understand that it's a relationship of similars. And to get back to the original etymology of that word, the Greek homoios pathos, which is what Hahnemann was drawing on, is the Greek for similar suffering. Now, the main point I want to make here, as my headline says, it doesn't have to come in a bottle. What I mean by that is, again, this concept of homeopathic being a relationship, of a disease to a specific medicine. Usually, it doesn't have to be, again, the homeopathic medicine you can buy at the store, or that your Heilkunst practitioner gives to you in a bottle. Let me just make the points here in the order I presented them. This is what Dr. Hahnemann realized, or even before he came to this understanding of our modern understanding of homeopathic. He was applying the law of similars in he was applying it even before he was using the potentizing method. So in other words, if we think back to even in Hahnemann's time and before Hahnemann's time, the venereal diseases were quite rampant, and especially syphilis. And it was kind of a discovered or known remedy that mercury was widely used as the specific remedy to treat syphilis. Now, Hahnemann really advanced that idea. He came to understand this as part of his concept of an example of the law of similars. So, even before we got into potentizing, all these doctors, including Hahnemann at the beginning, he was using mercury in its crude form, right? So, of course, that's highly toxic, and all kinds of really intricate case management had to be done to make sure that you try to cure the patient without killing them. It was very tricky business. So as we'll see later, Hahnemann came to the potentizing method, and that took this principle he was really making conscious of the law of similars, and it made it much more safe as well as effective. So we'll see a little more of the detail of that in a moment. But the main point in this slide here is that the law of similars is still being applied even if the potentizing method isn't being used. And then the final point, we can go much further in a future video. We get into very deep, more philosophical considerations, but the simpler point here is that we can take this idea of the law of similars, and we can take it even beyond a dropper bottle, or a pellet, or another form of what people call homeopathic remedies. And we can even give it as what we call a paper remedy, which is just writing the name of the Latin name of the homeopathic remedy along with its dose and potency on a piece of paper. And just by understanding human consciousness and the nature of language, well, just by someone holding that paper remedy, they're effectively getting the dose of that needed remedy. Now, back to this definition of the word homeopathic. When you don't have a homeopathic relationship, in other words, if you haven't selected the correct medicine, then the paper remedy, just like a dropper bottle or anything else, still will not be effective. Only when you have that relationship of similars, you get this activity of a lot of that high resonance, that high reactivity between the remedy, or the medicine I should call it, and the disease. And that's where even a paper remedy thought remedy, or even when we broadcast a remedy using our core bioresonance system, even when the person isn't in the same room, we can still broadcast that remedy, and based on the law of similars, there will be a medicinal action that takes place. It's quite amazing when you first discover that and you first have experiences of that, but it is quite a phenomenal experience. So as I mentioned, I just want to mention a little bit of the process of potentizing a medicine that Hahnemann came to develop. I'm not going to go deep into the technicalities. I'm just going to mention the concepts here, and we can explore that more deeply at another time, in a video all on its own. But essentially, the way Hahnemann came to potentize a medicine, giving it as a homeopathic remedy, I'm doing air quotes as I say that, it's a series of dilutions alternating with succussion. So succussion just means to shake vigorously, or to hit a test tube vigorously against the palm of your hand, to kind of create a vortex within that test tube, create kind of an energizing process. And so, as I say, that's done as a series. So whether you do a series of 10 dilutions or 20 or 50 or 100, you have a separate test tube for each step. And first you do the dilution, which is 1 drop per a set amount of mixture drops, and then that's succussed or shaken up, and then a drop of that new test tube is now taken out and mixed into the next test tube. So we potentize along different mathematical scales. The X, C, L, M, or F, all of those are representing Latin words. The X is the Latin for 10, and the C is the Latin for 100, and so on. And depending on which scale a remedy is being potentized on, that's the scale of dilution that will be used. 1 in 10 or 1 in 100. The LM has a little bit more of an intricate formula for doing it. It represents 50,000, but as I say, it takes a couple of steps to do that, but we're not going to go into those details. Just so you know, the point here that there are these different potentizing scales, and depending on the disease being treated, the health of the patient, and other factors, different scales will be used at different times. As I say, we can go much more deeply into that in another video. I just wanted to give you some familiarity with the terms and the concepts here. And this is where, when you get from your Heilkunst practitioner, you get a new remedy, you'll see the remedy name, and then you'll see a potency, such as the examples I have here, 30C, 200C, LM7, F13, so on and so on. And that just kind of tells you what the potency and energy level is of that remedy you're taking. And I've kind of alluded to this. There are 2 dimensions to the prescribing. Number 1 is the diagnosis based on similars, the law of similars. So when you diagnose a particular disease in your patient, what you're looking for is a medicine which will produce a very similar set of symptoms, or other functional disturbances or conditions which are produced by that medicine and are similar to the case of disease in the patient. So that's number 1. You have that similarity. Number 2, you want to prescribe the optimal potency and dosing method that will correctly and easily and efficiently and safely cure that disease in the patient. So earlier, when we were talking about the different scales, and also earlier we had talked about the traditional remedies, as far as in a dropper bottle or a pellet, compared to the thought remedies, compared to the core bioresonance. Any of these methods will be applied as appropriate once we've identified number 1. So those are the 2 dimensions of prescribing. And as I said earlier, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the comments box below. I'd be happy to address them right now if you're here live with me. Otherwise, I will save up your questions for a future video and address it at that time. So thank you for joining me this morning, and we will be seeing you next week for the new video.